Hello, it's Tracy Kiernan, and this acrylic painting tutorial is going to show you how to paint seashell with a giant pearl. So it's an under the sea themed painting, and let's go over colors and brushes. This tutorial does have a traceable, and I will be utilizing the traceable in this tutorial. So this is a single sheet printout for an 11 by 14 inch canvas. Place it over a sheet of graphite paper. So this piece of graphite paper I've actually purchased like 3 or 4 years ago, and I just reuse it over and over again. Very small investments, and it can be reused. And let's go over brushes and colors. So there are 8 colors in this. So titanium white, Mars blacks. These are the Liquitex basics paints, by the way. Unbleached titanium, phthalo green, Phthalo Blue, Quinacridone Magenta, light pink, and light blue violet. If you want to take out a color, light blue violet might be an optional one that you can take out. And brushes, so we are going to be using this number 8 round brush. This is a Princeton Velvetouch brush, and I like this brush because of the point, so we're going to do detail work with it. If you don't have this one, you'll need to find some kind of brush that has little bristles so you can do detail work with it too. A number 4 round brush and a 3/4 flat. I also use this 1-inch flat to help with the background because it's a big area to fill up, but if you don't have a 1-inch flat and you just have the 3/4 flat, that should be fine. And of course, use whatever brushes and colors you have available. We're going to start with a blank 11 by 14 inch canvas. Use whatever size you want, by the way, and place it in the horizontal mode. I'm going to start by painting the background. So the background is a very simple gradient. We're going to start at the top of the canvas and paint a light blue color. So I have light blue and titanium white. I'm mixing about equal parts of that color on my canvas. It's going to make a really pretty light pastel blue color. If you are not using this light blue violet, I said that's a color you can take out. If you want to simplify the palette, just use the phthalo blue, that darker blue, and add a whole bunch of white to it to lighten it up very, very lightly. And paint all the way across, but we want to do kind of this curved arc direction with our paint strokes. And this is the 1-inch flat brush. You can also use the 3/4 flat brush, so just any kind of big flat brush you have. And we want to have this sky or this water, this is not the sky, this is the underwater. We want it to gradually get darker as we work our way down. So you want to kind of blend on the canvas and go down a little bit and then grab just the light blue violet, and your light color is going to blend to that kind of medium blue color. So my paint strokes are going all the way across using the full width of the brush. You can kind of go halfway and then reload the palette and go the other half, but then you want to smooth your strokes up so that they go all the way across and blend on the canvas. So our underwater is getting darker and darker. When you're about 1/3 of the way down the canvas, grab your phthalo blue, that's that darker blue, without rinsing the brush. Start below your light blue violet. This color is very, very dark, so it can take over very fast. You want to start below your lighter color, and then you want to gradually kind of blend it up into the lighter color so it does wet on wet blending. And just be very, very careful not to get that to be too dark. So you only need little tiny bits of that dark blue to blend with the light blue violet. If you need to load your brush in more light blue violet to help that to blend better, you can. So we are going to go down about 2/3 of the way down the canvas. And we're going to stop because that's where our sand is going to transition to. So this dark color is the darkest part of the ocean. It's darker at the bottom, lighter at the top. So you're just doing phthalo blue, and then you're going to just leave a gap about 3.5 inches of space on the bottom. And let's bring this blue down just a little bit more so it's flat down here. We went curved the whole way, but I'm going to make this flat so it'll be easier to kind of transition to the sand. But still about 3.5 inches of space on the bottom. Go ahead and rinse your brush, and you want your palette loaded with Unbleached Titanium. We'll be using that color for the sand. You do not need to wait for this to dry before doing this step, and if our sand ends up mixing with some of the blue, that's actually okay. So get that all cleaned off and dried. Load your brush in just the Unbleached Titanium. And then you want to go ahead and start painting the sand area. So I can start at the bottom and then work my way up. It doesn't matter if you start at the bottom or the top. And you want to just kind of fill this area with the sand. I'm just doing horizontal strokes instead of the curved arc strokes that we did in the water area. As you get closer to kind of the top area, you want to add a little bit of black to your sand. We want it to be a little bit darker in the background. So just a teeny tiny bit of black mixed with your Unbleached Titanium. It's going to make kind of this gray color, dark grayish color. And you don't want to do too much black. You don't want it to be too dark, but it just should be slightly darker towards the top. And then when you get to your blue area, it's okay if some of that blue ends up mixing with this grayish color. So up here it is. You can see a little bit of blue kind of blending with it. So I'm actually bringing the sand up a little bit higher than that blue. I'm going to switch to my 3/4 flat here in just a little bit so I can get more of a smoother edge to this. But your sand does not have to be perfectly straight across. It can be a little bit wavy, and we can bring it up just a little bit over our dark blue line so we have no canvas showing through. And then we have a little bit of a wavy edge to our sand, our ocean floor bottom. So I'm going to get some more Unbleached Titanium on my palette. I have a 3/4 flat, so this one has kind of an edge that is easier to control here, and it's going to make this part a little bit easier to kind of define so it's not kind of scratchy on the end. It's a little bit smoother on the end. So see how I'm doing kind of this wavy end to this ocean floor. It's overlapping my dark blue a little bit. It's actually blending with my blue a little bit, but that's okay. We can have little bits of blue reflecting on the sand. A little bit up here, so make sure that's all defined, and then we can bring this down a little bit further. So we don't have to have this perfect gradient of dark beige blending to light beige at the bottom. You can grab a little bit of white actually. So this is titanium white I'm grabbing on my brush and bringing this down here so it's a little bit lighter on the bottom, but it doesn't have to be a perfect gradient. It can kind of be unblended, unmixed. In fact, we're going to add texture to this sand, or like different color variation to the sand later, so it doesn't have to be perfect. I'm just filling this in. At this point, there should be no canvas showing. And if you're painting on a stretched canvas, you can take your color and you can paint on the sides. When you are done with your background, it's going to look something like this. And you'll need to let this dry before we can go on to the next step. The next step involves transferring our clam and pearl design onto the canvas. So if you're working on an 11 by 14 inch canvas, this will just be printed on one sheet of paper. You don't have to tape anything together, which is kind of nice. And just grab your sheet of graphite paper, place it shiny side down. And we want to position this so it's on the left side of the canvas. There's about 1 inch of space under the bottom of the shell and about 2¼ inches on the left. That doesn't have to be exact, but I do like to give those measurements out if you want to make your placement just like mine. But again, it doesn't have to be exact. Just kind of make it off-center towards the left and make sure you have about 1 inch of space on the bottom. So you just want to press firmly. I'm just using a regular drawing pencil to trace all the lines of the clam and the pearl. And as long as you're pressing kind of firm and you're tracing this with the canvas flat on the table, it's harder to do this when the canvas is on an easel, by the way. You want to make sure it's flat and you're holding your template steady. You could tape it to the canvas if that helps holding it steady. And then when you lift, your design is on your canvas enough to see. And the very next thing that we're going to do to this is outline this with white paint. So I'm going to use titanium white and a number 4 round brush. And I'm just going to go over everything that I just traced with this. And your lines might be a little bit thick because of this brush. I'm twisting the brush, by the way, and I added just a little bit of water to it to kind of thin it down. But your lines do not have to be consistent. It's okay if they end up being thick. I'm just going to trace pretty much everything. I'm not going to do all the lines on the inside of the shell. I'm just going to do the exterior lines. However, if you want to just go ahead and trace everything with white paint, including the interior lines, the lines that are kind of going curved on the inside, you are welcome to do that. This helps define our shell and also helps you to see what I'm doing on camera. The lines are now visible. If you hand drew the shell, I still recommend sort of outlining with the white. So these are the lines I was talking about that you don't have to do. I just did a few of them. I'm actually going to not paint the rest of those lines. And then I'm going to do this part of the shell. You could use a smaller, like a detail brush to help outline this. But the fact that some of these lines are thick, like right here, it's fine. This circle is actually going to be painted in solid white anyway. Just make sure when you're outlining that, so see how these lines are thick? I'm doing them on the inside. See on the inside or the above that actual drawing line, and right here these lines are on the inside, so it's not altering the shape or making the shape of the shell larger. So when you're done with outlining your shell, we're going to load the colors that we'll be using for the bottom. I'm going to paint the bottom part of the shell first, and this is Quinacridone Magenta, light pink, and Unbleached Titanium. So magenta, pink, and beige. And we'll still be using the number 4 round brush. Without rinsing your brush, so we have the 4 round brush, we still have the white on the brush. If you rinsed it, go ahead and load white on the brush again, and then load it in your Quinacridone Magenta. So we're going to start over here on the right, and each of these sort of like curvy triangular bump areas of the bottom of the shell, we're just going to paint those with Quinacridone Magenta. And if some white is blending in there, that's fine. At the top of each of those curvy triangular areas, we're going to blend a little bit of white so that it is lighter on the top and it is darker on the bottom. So each of these little areas, we're doing Quinacridone Magenta, and then grab your white and just kind of like drag it and blend at the top so that you have dark bottom, light top. And then you just want to kind of go with the flow of this shape. So this right here is kind of changing direction. So this is like a frontal view part. You still just want to kind of make your paint strokes curve in the direction of that shape. So right here in the middle, they're going kind of vertical. On the left and the right, they're kind of curving and going diagonal. And again, the bottom is dark. So I'm not really rinsing my brush between each of these. I'm just starting with the dark at the bottom, and then I'll grab white at the top. However, if that's not working for you, you can wipe the brush off. If it gets kind of overloaded with too much paint, just get a towel and kind of wipe all the brush off and then reload with the dark, and then do your light and then wipe the brush off and reload and do each individual shape. Your blending does not have to be perfect. It can be left kind of streaky and not blended all the way, and that is okay. And I'm doing wet on wet blending by just dragging my paint color. So these are just getting kind of smaller over here on the side. We only need little bits of paint, little curved paint strokes. Grab your white and drag that down. We're going to do the inside part of the shell next without rinsing the brush. So you have quina and white on your brush. Grab your beige and just kind of blend that a little bit on the canvas. It's going to make kind of this light sort of mauve pink color. And we're just going to paint this kind of pillowy area inside of our shell. There's a wall. See where that kind of curved line is? Go around that and then go around your circle as well. So this should be lighter because we're adding beige to it. It should look like kind of like a light pinkish color in here, and it should stand out against the side of the shell that we did earlier that's a little bit darker. We're just kind of filling that in, curving and going in the direction of that shape. Go with these curves as well. I'm going to grab a little bit more of the Quinacridone Magenta, and under that pearl there's a little bit of shadow. So I'm blending this darker color just under that, so that part is a little bit darker. And let's make a kind of a unique color for the inside wall of the shell. So actually I have Quinacridone Magenta and I'm mixing it with Phthalo Blue. Those two colors are going to make this kind of dark purple, very, very dark color. Almost looks black. So Quina and Phthalo. And I'm just using that color for this inside wall. And I'm painting that in solid. So that is nice and dark back there. Same thing over here. Again, if your brush seems like it's overloaded, you could always rinse that off, start it over. Especially since there's still white on the brush, it might be mixing with it, it might be showing up too light. This should be a very dark color on the inside of the shell. So now I'm going to rinse, and I'm going to start working on the part of the shell that is above the pearl. But first, actually I'm going to go back and re-outline this line over here. So this top wall line, and do this as well. Now, if your paint is kind of too saturated in this area and it's pretty much too wet to outline, you can wait for that to dry and then go back and re-outline your white. So this is helping to kind of redefine our shape again. We painted it in, we lost our outline, so we're just going to go back and kind of re-outline this. I'm not going to re-outline the bottom part of the shell. I'm actually going to do that with black later. And I am going to grab some of the light pink that we loaded on our palette and just add a few kind of lighter paint strokes over here with the light pink. Just kind of blend it a little bit. And next we're going to do the top part of our clam. And so see these lines those lines, we're going to kind of really pay attention to those because that is the direction that our paint strokes are going to go in. The bottom part of it, so the part that's directly behind the pearl, is dark. So I like a dark phthalo blue with a little bit of magenta. I didn't rinse my brush off, however, you can rinse it off to kind of start over with it. Load your brush in phthalo blue and actually start at the bottom and just kind of drag your paint stroke outwards in that curved direction, and then load your brush in light pink. And on the end of your shell, blend that light pink. So this is kind of what we did at the bottom part of the shell where we used magenta and white. Now we're using phthalo blue and light pink. And we're doing light pink on the end and we're blending it to dark blue at the bottom. So you can do this both ways. You can start with your light pink and blend to dark blue at the bottom, or you can start with your dark blue and then blend to light pink on the bottom. I kind of did both things depending on which part of the shell I was working on. So your end piece is light pink, and then it blends to darker blue at the bottom. You don't need to over blend your color. So I'm going to grab light pink and white right here. I loaded some white on there to kind of add more color variation into this. So this is light right here, and then pink and white for this one, and dragging it down in a curved direction. I'm doing the lighter part. I'm going to go back on the bottom part of those and add darker blue later. So dark blue on the bottom and drag it up into the rest of the shell. So the bottom part, we can also do a little bit of Quinacridone Magenta on the bottom part and just drag it up. We can outline those lines later, those lines that are in between each of those kind of sections of the shell. So if you're losing those lines, that's okay. So kind of the pattern or criteria we're doing here is pink, white, and beige at the top. So kind of curved stroke at the top and dragging this down. And then at the bottom is our dark blue and magenta blended at the bottom. So we can fill this in, and then when we can go back and do our darker color. You just really kind of pay attention to the direction that each section of the shell is going in kind of a curvy direction. I'm going to load more titanium white on my palette and go back and grab some white. Add the white up here so it's a little bit lighter. So we have beige, pink, white at the top, different combinations of either of those colors. I'm going to go back and add a little bit lighter on the tops of these as well. Bring it down. And then we want our bottom part to still be dark. I'm going to do this one. So we're just filling in that shape, going in the direction of that shape. And I'm letting my paint color just kind of dry out as I approach the bottom. So it just kind of dries out and disappears towards the bottom. Pink and white for this one. Blending on the canvas, let it dry out as it approaches the bottom. And right here as well, just let it kind of dry out. Then we could either rinse, wipe, but we want this to be dark, so we don't want too much light color on our brush at this point. Double load in magenta, and that Quinacridone Magenta, which is that really, really dark magenta, and your phthalo blue, and we're going to go back and do our darker color, and that darker color is going to blend up. So I'm really focusing on one little section at a time. Blend it up into your lighter colors so it's darker at the bottom, and it kind of gets drastically lighter all of a sudden towards the top. Blending that up. Different variations of blue and dark magenta. Gives you that really pretty color variation look in your shell. grab my white and blend some white on some of these. I know that there's still magenta and blue on my brush, so a little bit of that is kind of showing up here. I'm just going back over this, making sure that top part is light, and just dragging it down into the dark area a little bit. Let me go back over here, kind of do that same thing. Re-outline the edge of the shell with the white. So I'm outlining each individual curve with that titanium white. Still some of that other color on my brush, so it's not pure white. We are going to paint the pearl next, and for now we're just going to paint it solid white and then do the shading on it later. So just the number 4 round brush and titanium white. And you're basically just painting the circle. So I didn't rinse my brush off, so it's grabbing, or it's kind of turning more of an off-white sort of bluish tint. If you like that, you can add a teeny bit of blue to your brush. Otherwise, you can just paint it solid white. And just kind of paint your paint strokes in that sort of curved circular direction. Make sure the exterior of the circle is nice and defined, as circular as you can get it. I am going to rinse the number 4 round brush, set that to the side, and grab my number 8 round brush. Specifically, I want to use this brush because it has a nice point to it. I'm going to use that to outline the interior lines of this shell. So we want these lines to be nice and thin, which is why I grabbed this brush, because of the point to it. If you don't have this exact brush, use a brush that has like a liner brush or really fine tipped bristles, and you're just going in there and you're outlining those lines. I am not letting those white lines touch the pearl, so it's going down, but then it's just kind of disappearing and not touching the pearl, if that makes sense. So it goes down, but not all the way. It goes down, release the pressure, let that line just kind of fade away. So we're just doing the lines as we drew them earlier, but now they're defined and we can see them. If we need to, we can even use this brush to kind of touch up the exterior lines of the shell. And I'm also going to use this brush to go back and touch up the bottom of the shell, wipe some of this white off, grab Quinacridone Magenta, and I'm just re-outlining the very bottom of these little bumps down here with the Quinacridone Magenta. You may not have to do that if you don't feel like it needs to be re-outlined. So I'm going to rinse, and I'm going to add shadow on the sand next. So shadowy area under the shell. And we'll need unbleached titanium, and we'll use the Mars Black to make this shadowy color. So we're going to make that kind of grayish color again. I'm going to use my 8 round for this. So grab your beige and a little bit of black to make kind of a medium color, and just go under the shell and just kind of like do left and right paint strokes to create this shadowy area. And these are very loose paint strokes. I'm doing some color variation by maybe adding a little bit more beige in there. Directly right under the shell, actually gets a little bit more black, a little bit more shadowy right on the bottom. And then kind of using the brush, using the side of the brush to kind of drag the paint left and right to create a little bit of texture in that sand. Left and right. So it's casting this sort of shadowy area. And so we will go and outline the bottom of the shell with black. But you don't want to overlap any of that sand over the bottom of the shell. So it should be darker directly under the shell and then lighter towards the bottom edge of the canvas. So you can add more of the beige color to your brush towards the bottom, but over here it's darker. I am going to take the black on the very, very tip of this brush and outline the very bottom edge of this. So now we have that part of the shell defined right there at the bottom. Just the part that touches the sand is outlined. I dragged a few lines kind of upwards. We are going to paint the coral next. And we're going to make this kind of magenta coral color that we'll be using for the coral. So rinse your brush off. We'll need the 4 round brush. And let's kind of water down some of this Quinacridone Magenta. I'm going to add a little bit more Quinacridone Magenta to my palette. And let's also add light pink to this. So Quinacridone Magenta, so dark magenta mixed with light pink and slightly watered down just to kind of loosen that color is going to give you this kind of dark coral color. And we're using the number 4 round brush. So I'm going to start at the base of the coral, kind of do kind of this branch. It's almost like we're painting tree branches. But on the ends of the branches don't have to be as pointy. So this coral starts out with a single trunk and it just kind of branches out into different segments. As you go to reload your brush, grab different amounts of your pink and magenta and that'll create different variations of color. So some of your branches may show up lighter, some might be showing up darker depending on how you load the brush. And so the end of the branchy pieces, those can be more rounded on the bottom and not pointed. So we can curve different directions and they're all just kind of swaying slightly towards the right. It's not, the direction of the coral is not really growing towards the left. All the branches are kind of going outwards to the right. We do a few pointing to the left, but for the most part, it's kind of swaying towards the right. And just build your little coral pieces. Make the ends slightly more rounded. We can do a little bit more color variation in this if we wanted to. Can even add a little bit of white to our brush, and I'll show you what I mean by that here in a second. I'm just doing a few more little pieces, kind of curving out here. And again, adding some darker color, some of that magenta without the pink gives you some darker pieces, making the base a little bit thicker. And I'm just going back on the ends of these. So by adding the light pink to the brush, you can even add a little bit of white to it if you want. And I'm just going back on the tops of some of these coral pieces and kind of dragging that down. So it kind of gives it a little bit of a highlight on the coral. So we have some pretty color variation in that. And next, we're going to introduce Phthalo Green to our palette. So this is the only time this color shows up. We're going to do a piece of green seaweed on the left side of our shell. So let's start with our 4 round brush, and this actually might be easier with the 8 round. And do kind of a wavy line. I'm going to switch to the 8 round brush just because I can do a thinner line with this. Flow that line a little bit better. I'm just taking the Phthalo Green. It's not mixed with anything. And I'm doing kind of a wavy center line. So this piece of seaweed is going to have individual leaves attached to this middle line. So a little wavy piece kind of sways to the left. And then I'm going to paint little individual kind of oval shaped leaves that are attached to this middle stem piece. So at the very, very top of the stem is an oval. And then I'm going to switch back to my 4 round brush here. A little bit easier to paint ovals with this brush. So basically, there's a line attached to a little oval piece. There's my little line. And you're just adding this kind of throughout that center piece. So oval and line, oval and line. Again, just the Phthalo Green, not mixed with anything. It might be hard to see over the dark background area, but we can add highlight color to it. So grabbing some white without rinsing the brush, just kind of go over your leaves and just blend a little bit of white gently into that green before it dries. So that is going to brighten up that green, give it that kind of light, glistening look on that seaweed. We can do some more leaves with this. If you want, you can even go back over your center line with your white to highlight that. Just going back over some of these leaves, but try not to blend that all the way because we have some pretty color variation with the green and the white. I'm going to switch back to the 8 round brush with a little bit of the white and the green both loaded on the brush, and I'm just going to go back over this line. Not with the intent to cover all the dark line, but just to add a lighter layer over it. I am going to rinse both of those brushes off, and the next thing I'm going to do is add shadow under my seaweed and coral. So same colors, the beige color with a teeny bit of black, so it makes that kind of grayish color. And do the same thing, just little kind of loose horizontal strokes. I'm going to do the same thing for our little seaweed piece. Again, just very loose paint strokes. I'm adding just a little bit more shadow under my clam. We are going to paint the little fish in the distance. And we can use either the 4 round or the 8 round for this, or both. And we're going to use a combination of the Phthalo Green and Phthalo Blue. So dark blue, dark green mixed together. So I'm going to take my dark green, I'm going to take my dark blue. This is the 4 round brush. And just in the upper right part of the ocean, we're just going to do school of fish. So we start by doing a little oval. So we're going to do like different sizes for these fish. So oval, and then on the left of that, little triangle, pointed side touching the oval. And then the fins, a little curved line on the bottom. I'm actually going to switch to my 8 round because I have that little tiny point to it. Can do these little fins a little bit easier with that tiny point. And our top fin. So our fish are not going to get much bigger than that. So we're going to paint a second fish, and I'm going to make this one just slightly smaller. So you start with the oval, and then you do a little triangle, and then top fin and bottom fin. And then you can change the variety of colors in this. So maybe one is solid blue, maybe one is solid green. So I'm just going to do a variety of small fish kind of gathered in this area. I'm going to add white to my palette and add white to some of the color in these fish. So some of these fish are going to be lighter color, but the same technique. Without rinsing the brush, I added just a teeny bit of white. So that's going to create kind of a lighter teal color. And if you want, you can add lighter color to any of the fish that you just painted. So this adds to the really pretty color variation in our school of fish. Next, we are going to paint the pearl. So that white coat that we painted earlier should be dry by now. And let's rinse our brushes off and let's grab our number 4 round brush and let's make a gray on our palette. So mixing black and white, about 3 parts white, 1 part black. So it shouldn't be very, very dark gray. It should be more like a medium gray color. And at the very bottom of your circle, paint a gray area. And then let's get some more fresh white on our palette. We're going to take, without rinsing the brush, we're going to grab just the white on our brush. And we're going to take that and we're going to blend it. So you can even use your finger to help blend. So I can take this and kind of smear this. We want the pearl to be dark on the bottom and then light right in the center. So I'm just grabbing some more paint right on my finger. So the very, very center of that circle is very bright white. Then I can take some white and do kind of these curved lines on the side. The point is we don't want it to be all solid the same color. We want it to be shadowy at the bottom. And it kind of helps to use your finger just to kind of spread this out. Gives it that kind of pearly look almost, where it's not blended all the way. And then right at the bottom, just a little bit more black for shadow at the bottom. A little bit of white to blend that back up. And just a teeny bit more black. We are going to paint some simplistic bubbles next, and so we need some fresh titanium white. You can use either your 8 round or your 4 round for this. I'm using the number 4 round brush. I'm going to load that in the white and just paint little circles kind of all throughout the underwater area. Some of these are just little dots. So we can just stamp little dots using the tip of the round brush. You can make like a little row of dots kind of going in a wavy direction. Do another bigger circle up here. So just kind of wherever you want to place the bubbles, kind of scattered randomly throughout, or you can make them kind of go in a row. Then I'm going to add a little highlight in each of my larger circles. So still using the round brush, do like a little white curvy mark on the inside of the circles. I'm going to rinse and do a shadow mark inside of each of the bubbles. So for the shadow mark, I'm using Phthalo Blue. You can also use Mars Black if the Phthalo Blue is not showing up very well against the dark background. So just a little dark mark on the bottom of each of the bubbles. I'm going to rinse the 4 round and go back to the 8 round specifically because I want to do some outline work with the color Mars Black. So this is the 8 round brush. I'm loading black just on the tip of that brush, and I'm going to go ahead and outline my pearl. Very, very thin, loose line of Mars Black. We don't have to outline the entire circle, but I do want to outline the bottom edge of it. I'm going to go ahead and outline the top edge as well. So just a very thin black line around that entire circle. And then I'm going to do some outlining work on the shell. So this very, very top line. And then these bumps, I'm adding a very thin black line at the very top part of those bump lines. And then these in-between lines as well. I'm just taking that black and outlining the middle part of those in-between lines very loosely. I'm going to rinse and do a few more of the little bubble dot things in the water. These are all sort of final touch-ups in the paintings at this point in my tutorials. I usually just go into detail work, and you can kind of make your own creative choices here if you don't want to do all the little bubble additions, or if you want to add more fish or a different kind of seaweed in your painting, you're welcome to do that. On the top of each of these leaves, I did like a little white kind of curved highlight. Gives that extra pop of brightness on our leaves. I'm going to go back and touch up my sand as well. So I have the Unbleached Titanium and the number 8 round brush, and I'm just going in here and just kind of like using the side of my brush to kind of drag textured paint strokes of this sand color on the ocean floor. Going back with my shadow color, just to give it a little bit more texture. This is also an optional touch-up if you don't feel like you need to texture up your sand. Speaking of texture, doing some kind of sand medium here would be fun. If you have texture medium, if you want to add texture to your actual tactile texture to your painting, you can. And just loosely adding more sand color in there. Another detail I'm going to add is a little bit of seaweed kind of hanging out over here on the right. So I'm just going to make a color here. I have the blue, the green, the phthalo blue, phthalo green, a little bit of white. I'm going to add a little bit more phthalo green on here. Sometimes it's fun just to make up colors. And just one of those kind of wavy, simple lines kind of hanging out over here on the side. I didn't really paint the base of this seaweed plant, but it's just right here. The base would be kind of over here on the side. Just another little detail. And like I said, you can add more things to your painting. And I'm going to rinse the brush. I'm going to add another little white dot to each of my bubbles. So titanium white on the very, very tip of the 8 round brush, and at the very, very top of the bubble, just a little white dot. And then the last final detail I'm going to do is with the 8 round brush and the black, I want to outline the very top slither edge of the shell with a very thin black line. So just on those top curves. And that is it. This is the conclusion of how to paint seashell with pearl. Hope you enjoyed this one. Thanks for watching, and thanks for painting with me.